February 13th, 2024, coming to you from the Go-Goat Sports Studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. And if you're heading to a game in downtown Vancouver, make it a staycation. Book your stay at the Wall, 604-331-1000. Ask for the Sekeres Price rate. Some blackout dates may apply. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price. Grady Sass hitting switches, conducting things with Madison Buckingham. Big show coming up. And it's all brought to you by Applewood Auto Group.
Applewood Nissan in Langley wants you to join the electric revolution. Check out the 2024 Nissan Leaf, starting from $82 a week, plus you get a $500 loyalty rebate. It's all at Applewood Nissan in Langley. It's all good at Applewood.
Poll question today: what position do the Canucks most need to upgrade? You can vote for fourth line forward, third pair defense, top six or top four. If you don't think they're done big game hunting or still see holes there, or you can vote none. Do so at Sekeres Price on Twitter and YouTube. And we fashioned this poll 24 hours out from the NHL, or 24 days out from the National Hockey League trade deadline. Said it on the welcome ad yesterday. Look, if you can get another top four defenseman or top six forward, great. But typically those come with harsh acquisition costs. Canucks have already traded out some prospects and picks here in the Elias Lindholm deal. So for me, it's a depth piece up front. It's a depth piece on the back end. If I had to pick one, I think I'm going forward, just because I'm not sure how you're going to hold up if you start losing forwards in the playoffs. Not to mention, is Nils Oman as a fourth line center going to do it for? I know he's been decent on the penalty kill, but is he going to be able to be a performer in his first go with the Stanley Cup playoffs? So I voted fourth line forward, but I can hear a case for all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm waffling between a fourth line forward and blowing the doors off this with the top 4D.
All right.
And just
talk to me.
Ensuring. I don't necessarily have a name in mind.
Well, there's Hanifin and Tanev in Calgary, of course.
Yeah.
There's Chychrun potentially in Ottawa.
I mean,
let me get to my list here.
It would seem like a right shot would be the best case scenario, and that's Chris Tanev most notably. There are other options out there, but I just think in the absence of a forward group that is super responsible defensively, if you've got 6 granite block defenders or 6 granite block position holders, they're not necessarily all noted for defense, but I think a 6 emphatic National Hockey League defenseman, I think, makes you pretty formidable. And you know, if everybody got healthy, my goodness, they'd really have 7 of them, and they'd be able to withstand injury during the playoffs as well. I mean, you have to assume, and of course you got to win the series before you move on. But if you're the general manager, you have to assume you make it past the first round. Like you have to construct your team as if you're making it past the first round, as if you're going to feel the pressures of attrition.
Of course.
So got to get ready for an injury. You got to get ready for somebody to be out, and then what do you look like? You got to be ready for that.
How about Matt Dumba?
Yeah, and
is he still a top 4?
I've been thinking a lot about Matt Dumba lately.
More on him. More on him in a second. Let's get to our big story today. Canucks trying to win the road trip game in Chicago against the Blackhawks. Still no Connor Bedard. He is on the ice skating in a non-contact jersey prior to organized team practices and morning skates for Chicago, but he won't play tonight. Our old friend Jason Dickinson centering the second line for the Chicago Blackhawks. Philip Kurashev in the role of first line center for the Chicago Blackhawks. Canucks, of course, 2-1-1 on this road trip, meaning anything shy of a regulation loss is winning the road trip, right?
Yeah.
That's 6 of 10 points if it's an overtime or shootout loss. And of course, 3-1-1, another resounding success road trip. You've talked about winning weeks, Blake. Well, forgive me, are we starting on Mondays or Sundays?
Sundays, calendar weeks.
Well, calendar weeks, then we've already got a win in place. Sunday in Washington. Win against Chicago here tonight would mean any point versus Detroit or Winnipeg would also be a winning week.
Yes.
In the Blake Price
They were
playbook.
just 1-1-1 last week, so it was a push, if you will. But, I mean, as much as, and I'll steal from my soccer parlance from my other gig, it hasn't felt like they've been on the front foot lately.
No.
Like they're 2-1-1, but not really feeling like their normal selves.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, would that have to change. The narrative, the feel would have to change with an emphatic win here. I mean, you touched on some of the quote-unquote highlights of the Blackhawks lineup here. Like, go win this game 4-0. Go win it 5-1.
Well,
like
we
you
thought
should.
they were on their way to smashing Chicago here
That's
at
right.
Rogers Arena. 2 early goals, and then they just basically sat back and cruised. Didn't need to.
Yeah.
Against what is one of the worst teams in the National Hockey League.
And if I'm talking, I bring that up. Like, guys, you made that way closer, way tighter than it needed to be in a game that it just shouldn't be. Be the better team.
Mm-hmm.
Go out and show that you're the better team, and put the pedal to the floor. So I hope they find their front foot. And this is not high level opposition here, but it's going to get tougher. So remind yourself what it feels like to manhandle another team, and do it in this game tonight. And I think all of a sudden a 3-1-1 then and an emphatic win, you kind of erase whatever feelings you might have right now about how are they scuffling? Not really. They've just sort of plateaued, I think is probably the most accurate way of describing them right now.
Yeah. Still awaiting word here on roster and lineup for this evening, but maybe the 3 Swedes get together here. We talked about that yesterday. Do you want to see Höglander and Lindholm with Pettersson? And then, of course, Jet Wu on his first NHL call-up, number 44 he'll wear. We'll see if he gets an opportunity. But, yeah, the Canucks, especially against this club, as you note, I think want to show something here because it's kind of been some ho-hum performances. Haven't really played a complete game here in a while, right?
No.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
like
really nice
power
periods.
play was going, even strength wasn't. If even strength was going, the power play wasn't.
Yeah.
Penalty killing for the most part has been pretty good, but and of course goaltending as well, where Thatcher Demko was sublime in Washington against the Capitals. Okay, couple of bits here. Number one, you tell me ESPN has come to the table ranking Quinn Hughes as the number 2 defenseman in the National Hockey League.
Well, this is actually a good news story in a lot of ways, and a little bit concerning in some ways as well. So they did this last year, and last year he didn't appear on any ballots at all in the top 10 defensemen in the league.
That's crazy.
Yeah. This year, he finishes second in all the voting. This is talking to NHL executives, by the way, and coaches perhaps too. This year, he finishes second behind Cale Makar. But there is one, and it's identified as a general manager in the league. There's a general manager in the National Hockey League that did not have Quinn Hughes in his top 10 NHL defenseman list. At last check,
maybe he's just forgetful.
And sometimes I think that might happen where your guy just has a brain fart and forgets that a guy exists.
And the reporter doesn't follow up and go,
you didn't vote on so-and-so. Yeah.
Did you mean to leave Hughes entirely off the list?
Just to review, Quinn Hughes.
Really, they're donating their time here. This is an exercise that I've done this in the past where you talk to players, coaches, executives anonymously to fill you in on either a big game or a list you're doing. And you're just happy if the person responds.
I need it by Tuesday at 9 a.m. So at 8:45,
exactly.
That person's like, oh, crap, that list.
It's not like you're interrogating them.
So I hope that's the case, because you're right. There's a very real possibility that that's what happened here. But Quinn Hughes has a 5-point lead on Cale Makar right now, really late in the season. Like, it's getting to the point where if Quinn Hughes gets hot, and he's been pretty good lately in terms of points, but if he gets actually hot, he could run away and hide on Cale Makar for the points race amongst defensemen. So for him to be forgotten is quite a leap.
Yeah.
But okay.
Brock Boeser did the Spitting Chicklets podcast, said he was happy that he finally got to 30 goals because it shut the Vancouver media up. And I'm here to say thank you for shutting us up, Brock. We had done the Brock Boeser underachieving. When is Brock Boeser going to reach potential? Is Brock Boeser still a goal scorer in this National Hockey League show? A lot over the last, 5 years after that brilliant rookie debut. Now, and so I'm happy that we're not sitting here talking about Brock Boeser's struggles or Brock Boeser's next NHL destination, which had been so much of the narrative around the player and around the team for several years now. I will say this, hasn't scored on the road trip, has goals in 2 of his last 11 games, a hat trick against the Columbus Blue Jackets. And, as we know, they're much like Chicago, kind of a different animal in this NHL kingdom. So good on Brock. He talked about Tanev being a father figure for the group, named him one of the top 5 beauties in the National Hockey League. We should do that one day. Put together
top 10 beauties,
our top 5 beauties, just and how you define beauties is personal. So, anyways, but we'll see if he can get back on track here, playing with JT Miller. That duo has stayed together through the line blending of Coach Tocchet over the weekend.
I hope his comment was tongue in cheek because most of the media was absolutely pulling for him based on how things have gone for him personally. To have a rebound, I don't know that we had the utmost faith that it was going to happen, but I think everybody was pulling for him from the human side of things to make that happen. And here's the other thing. It was him that also held that 30 goal mark with such a claim. He wanted to get to 30 goals badly. That's why that whole quote with J-Pat was sort of stunning a couple of years back, because he brought it up. This is the year I get to 30. He was the one that's put that flag in the ground, said, I'm going to go get it. So, I hope
he's at 30 now.
Yeah.
They have 29 games left.
Yep.
Does he get to 40?
I mean, it would be a disappointing end of the season if he didn't. And yet it's funny. Like, in the end of the season, you think that a bunch of guys are tracking for 40 goals. And invariably, it seems like only a handful ultimately get past 40 goals and a few get past 50. So it seems the math just he's getting to 40 goals, but it is hard. The final third of the season, it's a little bit tougher to score. So I would expect,
as mentioned, goals in 2 of the last 11. He's gone kind of quiet here. There hasn't been a ton of production out of Boeser of late, especially if you take that Columbus game out of the mix, the one right before the break. He had gone 6 games, I think, in advance of that Columbus game without a goal as well, and points in just 2 other games during this 11-game stretch. 2 assist night against the Carolina Hurricanes a week ago, and he had a couple assists in the overtime.
But to me, he's the canary in the
Columbus.
coal mine here of just that front-footedness that I was talking about. Like this team hasn't seemed assertive offensively. Great individual effort from Höglander and from Roenick recently, but they haven't seemed systemically like we're coming, we're rolling shift after shift and causing havoc. It just hasn't seemingly been there.
Yeah, and frankly, not concerned at all. Would prefer to see that version of the Vancouver Canucks rolling into the playoffs and not necessarily here in mid-February. Yeah. And it's one of the things
you don't want to lose that top seed though either. That's pretty important.
Indeed. More on that over the course of the program, particularly when we bring Irfaan Gaffar in here to talk about Vegas, Edmonton, and Vancouver, this potential arms race in the Pacific Division in advance of the National Hockey League trade deadline on March 8th. Okay, I wanted to throw this at you because, yes, we mentioned it yesterday, been looking at it here for a few weeks now, but possibly a big night last night in the NHL with regards to separation in the Western Conference wildcard race. Calgary had played so well, lost at the Garden against the Rangers. Kraken lost to the Devils, and the Devils are equally desperate in the Eastern Conference. Arizona loses in Philadelphia. Again, a couple of teams that are desperate, and then maybe Minnesota lives to fight another day by getting a victory in Vegas against the Golden Knights. They are most desperate when you take a look at their predicament. Seattle, 52 points in 52 games, 6 back with 4 teams to jump, and giving games to the Kings and Blues, who are currently on wildcards. Arizona, 50 points in 51 games, 5 teams to jump, 8 back, and giving games to the Kings. That may be that for the Coyotes and Kraken. If you're taking an objective look at your hockey club and you're in Bill Armstrong's seat in Phoenix or you're in Ron Francis's seat in Seattle, I do think you have to look at it at this stage of the game going, okay, 24 days left, however many games, even if we go on a big time heater here, it's so difficult to pick up points on teams in 3-point games, right? Not to mention leapfrog that number of teams. We have also talked about, teams fall out. This could well be a buyer's market. The Arizona and the Kraken UFAs, the rentals to be from these clubs. Going to run you down the Arizona guys first. We talked about Dumba. He's at $3.9 million as a right shot defenseman. Jason Zucker's at 5.3. Liam O'Brien, who certainly made a name for himself at Rogers Arena fighting Nikita
Sandpaper for
Zadorov.
60,
He's a $775,000 guy, and our old friend Travis Dermott's there at $800,000. Those are the UFAs to be with the Coyotes. Do you have any interest there?
I do have interest in Dumba, but at the right price. I mean, he's turned into just a physical presence and defensive defenseman.
And it's really because coming out, boy, he had all the athletic tools.
Yeah, he had a 50-point year.
He's still playing 20 minutes a night.
But he's not the complete defenseman that he once was.
No.
And at 3.9 and at 29 years of age, like, what are you asking for if you're the Coyotes? Like, I know what you want. You want sun, moon, and stars, but you're not getting it. I think you might just be happy with stars. So,
and Arizona is one of those teams, Blake, that has so many draft picks now.
So they might want a warm prospect body.
Only one first round. In fact, they do not have additional first round picks over the next 3 years, but they have 2 extra seconds, 2 extra thirds, an extra fourth, and an extra seventh in this draft.
Mm-hmm.
They have 3 extra seconds and an extra third in next year's draft. And then they have 2 extra seconds and an extra third in the 2026 draft. So, look, you'll always take draft picks, but I'm not sure that would be atop the shopping list there. I think they're probably looking for players at this stage of the game.
Probably.
Unless they're totally stripping it down in preparation for a sale and a move here.
Is Podkolzin for Dumba overpayment?
This was what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Is that a prospect trade if you're looking Arizona's way?
Again, I love Podkolzin, folks. I'm not trying to get rid of him at all, but again, you have to pay to play.
Mm-hmm.
So
Zucker's a former Penguin, we should mention. Now, 22 points in 41 games, playing 14 and a half minutes. He's 32 now and a 5.3 cap hit. That's, excessive, but
27 goals last year with the Penguins.
And a better offensive team.
Yeah. So you wonder if he could refine that touch.
Now Seattle. Eberle at 5.5. Tatar at 1.5. Wenberg at 4.5. And then right shot defenseman Justin Schultz at 3.5. That's an interesting list. Now, Tatar has not been a playoff performer over his career.
No.
There's word that that Edmonton is eyeing Eberle to get the band back together.
The band back, yes.
A little bit. Wenberg's a pass-first centerman. I'm not sure that's a fit here with the Canucks unless you're going to fully commit to Elias and or JT on the wing. And Schultz is a right shot defenseman who's fallen a little bit out of favor there. Is playing, where is he playing? 16 minutes a night.
Schultz isn't the profile of a defenseman that the Canucks need. So,
but another former Pittsburgh Penguin there.
Yeah. Eberle's
they've gone to that well so often that I feel like we have to note it every time a guy has worn the black and gold of the Penguins.
Jordan Eberle's listed at 5'11". Does he look 5'11" to you? I don't think he's 5'11". He seems smaller than that.
To me, he looks 6'5" because I covered his 2 World Junior performances.
Unbelievable character guy. Like he's, I would have that guy on my team certainly, but is he the finishing piece for the Canucks in a playoff? I don't know. And with that salary, you need them to hold some back.
It's 9 goals and 29 points in 48 games, playing 17 minutes a night. 33 years old now. Oh my God, I feel so old.
Yeah, I know.
He's 33 years old.
Yeah.
He'll always be the Canadian World Junior hero for me. Anyways, just wanted to point that out because we're now at the time where if you do intend on being a seller, you probably are going to give yourself some runway to gauge prices, see who's interested in what's your players. I suppose you could, on the morning of trade deadline or the day before, send out the missive, hey, we're open for business and ready to sell. But, most of these general managers are going to want to lay a foundation or are going to want to get a gauge on the market. So we're nearing the point, if we're not already there, with certain of these franchises where it's, or get off the pot time.
Here's the difference.
And you start marketing your players and you start taking calls and you start seeing if you can counter and get the best deals possible.
Seattle Kraken have teased their fans with some decent play last year.
Well, they got to they got to game 7 against Dallas. They were a goal away from going to the conference final.
So for them to give up early, I don't think so. I think they go right to the trade deadline to try to push it. They've got a building to fill. Mm-hmm. The Arizona Coyotes also have a building to fill, and it's the size of a shoebox.
Oh, my.
So they don't have the same pressure. They don't have to keep a fan base fully engaged. They need to keep 5,000 people fully engaged. And even maybe that is overstating it. Maybe half engaged. So they got a lot less pressure on them. So the Coyotes can bail way earlier than anybody else can, and the math is worse for them than anybody else too. So I think my eyes are more on the Coyotes than they are on the Kraken right now in terms of bailing early.
Well, and as we look to the Eastern Conference, we talked about the Washington Capitals, how they're effectively in win mode now, win now or be a seller. They got the Colorado Avalanche on Tuesday night at their building. And then on Wednesday, the Penguins get the Panthers. So Pittsburgh and Washington, I think, are two other teams now to watch in terms of how much touch are you going to lose with your conference wildcard race. And does that put you on the path to being a seller at the NHL trade deadline?
Justin on YouTube, this team can score. They need a rat and a goon. Do you go goon and rat shopping?
And we talk about this in today's show and in a video that you'll see on our YouTube and our social media channels. It's not necessarily are the Canucks tough enough discussion, because toughness has taken on a different definition now in the Stanley Cup playoffs. You don't see all the fighting, and occasionally you see it when a game's out of hand, but size, physicality, hits, leaning on a guy, making sure your presence is known, perhaps having a deterrent to some level. You look at the Canucks, you see some very big bodies there. Nikita Zadorov,
but the problem is
guy.
It's defensive,
Carson
and
Soucy.
you can't lose defensemen to penalties, right? So you can't have policemen on defense anymore. It's too critical. You need the defenseman available to you. It needs to be coming from a forward. Do they have an idiot? Do they have that playoff idiot? The playoff idiot can be a useful thing.
Well, when you say idiot, I think Nazem Kadri and getting himself suspended to the detriment of his team in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
That's unhinged, though.
Maxim Lapierre.
Yeah. That's who I'm thinking of. Like, who plays that role? Niels Höglander's got sort of a maniacal smile, but I don't think he's got it in him to be that idiot, that poking, because you want to get them off their game in the playoffs. You see them by the third game, you hate each other already. But why do you hate each other? Give them a reason to hate you. Give them a reason to be distracted.
Could Connor Garland, perhaps?
Could Garland? I was just going to say, could Garland or JT be that idiot?
Again, JT, having the top 2 or 3 players in your team being the idiot is dangerous. Because if you lose him to a major or something like that, he's out of the game and not helping you. But yeah, Miller's going to provide sandpaper for sure. But a guy that really walks that line, that if he gets a 5-minute major or a 5 and a 10, you're like, okay, he did a job there, and we don't necessarily miss him.
Captain Canuck on YouTube. Garland is our rat, which Cash McGregor replies, he's actually the mouse.
Yeah. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you don't need the rat.
Then let me ask you, Liam O'Brien for $775,000. It's going to cost you nothing. It's going to cost you a D-level prospect.
Not a good enough.
This is a journeyman who has,
That's the thing. They actually got to be able to
Max Lapierre could play the sport of hockey.
Of course he could.
So
he could play center ice, Max. He killed penalty. Like,
you do need to be able to play the sport. So again, we're talking about fine lines here about finding the right player. There's very narrow paths to finding that perfect player.
Well, speaking of Seattle, Yanni Gord is that guy, but he's making $5+ million and has term.
Yeah.
Don't think
too much term there.
No.
Yeah. Was he not just signed this past summer? Yeah. And they got 20 points out of him through 50 games.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out Blake Price with a Robinson-esque fine lines drop just now. Huh? The soccer play-by-play guy hit you with the front foot earlier, and with a Robbo fine lines here. We're going to get to the Whitecaps actually in our Sports Interaction best bets here in a moment. But first, let's get to our menu. Irfaan Gaffar is going to join us. He's been hanging out with J-Pat on Rink-Wide and plenty of trade deadline topics and situations to discuss with Irf. We'll get to some hashtags, the best and worst of Twitter. And today on hashtags, well, we're featuring head coaches politicking already. We are months in advance of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and we're already got one NHL coach, and you won't believe where, who's already starting the gamesmanship and the willful blindness.
Sedin is not Swedish for
yes. The slow baseball season there as well. John Shannon's going to join, and we'll talk some football with BC Lions star defensive end Mathieu Betts off to the National Football League.
Best Bets, a presentation of Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook and casino. What do you got, Matt?
Well, I'm not sure the Lions will be fine down in Mexico against Tigres for the Whitecaps on Wednesday. This is a massive ask of them to win down there at their ground. As we know, the Mexican League has already started, so this side should be in midseason form, whereas the Caps are just getting going. This is only their second for real match after the draw at Starlight in Langford. We do know that Vancouver either needs a win or a tie of greater than 1-1. 1-1 tie puts us into extra time here. So I'm expecting goals. I would suspect that means they're giving up something on the other side. Could be a busy night for the Caps keeper. I'm going over 2.5 goals. It pays at 1.80.
That stands to reason. It does. The Winnipeg Jets got off the schneid. They got their first win in 5, but it wasn't super impressive. And believe it or not, the San Jose Sharks have got points in 8 of their last 10 games.
Are we going big dice roll here?
We are.
Because Hurdle's out.
The Sharks over the Jets.
Oh, boy.
4-10 on tomorrow's menu.
How often do you see an NHL game paying 4 times?
That's what attracted me. It's a big number. It's a big number.
Really,
so I thought I'd go there. Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook and casino, custom props and parlays you won't find anywhere else. Speaking directly to a Vancouver sports fan and best in class casino with 1,000 plus games and live dealers. Scan that code you see on YouTube. 200% welcome bonus. And it's Sports Interaction. Bet local. Must be 19 years of age. Please play responsibly.
Irfaan Gaffar coming up next.
If you don't have tickets for a big game at the rink, go to Greta Bar, 50 West Cordova Street, and you can soak up the atmosphere. Whether you have tickets and are walking to and from the rink or not, it's a great place to catch the game. And for road games, of course, like February the 22nd, cheer them on at Greta Bar. Spend $10 on a ticket at nationgear.ca. Proceeds from the night with Canuck Army and Sekeres Price. Go to Canuck Place Children's Hospice. We'd love to see you there. February 22nd, Greta Bar, 50 West Cordova.
Great Clips is the official hair salon of the National Hockey League. There are 37 salons in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, all Canadian-owned and operated. Download the app and find the nearest to you. When you're up next for a cut, you'll get a ready next text. Great Clips. It's going to be great. Irfaan Gaffar has been joining Jeff Patterson on Rink-Wide this season, and I just got some news. He's buying dinner after Super Bowl weekend, Blake. Welcome to the show, Irf. How you doing, buddy?
Great, guys. Thanks for having me on.
You're more than welcome. first things first, gonna ask you our poll question. We're 3 weeks and a bit here from the NHL trade deadline. What do you perceive as the Canucks' biggest need right now? We've got options on our poll: fourth line forward or third pair defense, or if you want to go a bigger game hunting in the top 6 or the top 4. But what do you perceive their biggest need to be right now? What do you think they think their biggest need is?
I think the
right
easy
now?
answer right now would be, or the sexy answer would be, a top 6 forward. I think that one's going to be a little bit more difficult to do, but from where they're looking at it, I think you got to go depth defenseman. You got to go someone that you're able to have in the lineup that can play in that 7/8 role if you don't need him every single night. Mark Friedman's been a nice story. Jet Wu, obviously, it's going to be a nice story being called up and things like that. But you get another guy that goes down, you need someone that either has had some sort of experience of being in that position and being called up in a playoffs position, or someone that you can plug in and play right away and not have to worry about anything.
Okay, go ahead.
Given that we've seen a rotating door at the bottom of the lineup, period, at the bottom of the forward line, I mean, is it crazy to think that they might pick up a new fourth line center? Because are they convinced that Niels Omana is a starting center in the playoffs?
Yeah, see, that's the interesting one to me, right? Because if they go to the playoffs, Blake, and you have Elias Lindholm, you can go 3 centers. And I think that part of acquiring him is obviously, yes, to be in the top 6 and to play with a guy like Elias Pettersson, or maybe even obviously like what we've seen with JT Miller and Brock Boeser. But when you get into the playoffs and you're going against a team that's rolling their 3-4 lines, and you're going to need a guy that's a third line center that has some experience playing in that position, Lindholm is their guy. So that's why I think another forward there probably is something that they'd be interested in. The name out there obviously remains to be Phil Kessel and the interest there. So to be able to have 1, 2, 3C and have that there, I agree with you. Like, are they convinced that Amon can be the guy? I'm not entirely sure. That's kind of why I think they went and acquired Lindholm.
So let's dare to dream for a second and play out the top 6 or the top 6 forward want or need, however you want to characterize it. Where do you think Pittsburgh's at with Gensel right now? I mean, you take a look at them. They're 7 back in the wild card. Yeah, they got a couple of games in hand, but you got 4 teams to jump there. Where do you think they're at with Gensel? And do you think the Canucks have the wherewithal to go out and make another big trade for Gensel?
Well, I think if in a dreamland, yeah, absolutely. They would love to acquire a guy like Jake Gensel, but there's also one guy in Pittsburgh that really still believes in his team, and that guy has a lot to say in that organization, and that's Sidney Crosby. And I think that Sidney Crosby really, really, really enjoys playing with Jake Gensel. I think he believes in that group. If they can get Erik Karlsson looking half as good as he looked last season, that team might be able to have a little bit more success than they've been having. But Jake Gensel's a name that's been out there, obviously linked to the Vancouver Canucks with the history with the management group here. He's a guy the Edmonton Oilers have been looking at. There's no secret the Oilers want to add to their top 6. I mean, Corey Perry probably isn't the answer to be playing with a guy like Leon Draisaitl, so you know that they're in the mix as well. And really, it's going to be up to whoever the Pittsburgh Penguins decide that gives them their best offer. And if an offer comes, or, if the next 3 weeks things change with the way that their team's been playing, Gensel, Crosby, and that management staff can say, okay, let's try and figure this out together.
We're talking a player, a prospect, and a high pick for Gensel. Yeah. Is he even more expensive?
I would say at least, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The price for Chris Tanev is not going down anytime soon. More teams are probably in the mix now than were a few weeks back. And yet the Vancouver Canucks continue to pine for him. Brock Boeser was on Spit and Chicklets and still talked about him being dad to the young guys when he was there. It wasn't let's move on sort of answer at all. These guys still want Tanev. I don't know how they make it happen, but they still do want him, don't they?
No, it was definitely an let's move on. It was an I would have stayed if you would have offered me a contract. Mm-hmm. But that was one of the things that obviously didn't happen, when Chris Tanev left. And look, 10-team no trade list for Tanev. We've heard Ottawa was in the mix. Obviously, nothing really happened there with the Flames, but the asking price is high. Is it going to be a first-round pick? Is it going to be a second-round pick? What's it going to take to get Chris Tanev? There's a lot of contenders or teams that think they're the contenders. The Leafs, Morgan Riley played with Chris Tanev at the World Championships years ago, went back to the Toronto Maple Leafs and said, I want to play with this guy. And that's been happening there for a long time in Toronto. For the Vancouver Canucks, I think if they were able to somehow figure it out and acquire a guy like Chris Tanev, you know exactly what you're getting, a stability on the blue line, a guy that is incredibly good in the room. Obviously, Blake, you just mentioned Brock Boeser talking on Spit and Chicklets there, and it's no secret. You know, Pedersen, Hughes, guys like Boeser, Bo Horvat, obviously, you know, when he was coming up, talk about a guy like Chris Tanev. He's not the flashiest guy. You obviously, you know, see his mug all over the place. He eats pucks for a living, but it's the professionalism. It's a guy that's been there very early on in his career. Guy was playing in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. And that experience is something that isn't lost on a team that really doesn't have any experience as they head into the postseason.
If he had another year, I think you play Sun, Moon, and Stars, but with no years remaining, and the fact that even right now, guys, he's getting dinged by pucks. He's leaving. He did it again. It's like the second game in a row where he's down the hallway. Like, you could acquire that guy and he could be injured in Game 3. I mean, that's why you're acquiring him in some ways, but it's a risky proposition, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one the other night, the arm into the post, that probably didn't feel good. And like Chris Tanev does, sat on the bench, didn't go to the room. I know the room at Madison Square Garden is a little bit different, but didn't end up going to the room. But I think that, you know, he was top of mind for a very long time. And then when they went out and got Zadorov, I don't think things worked out too well there. And then obviously you go out and you get Lindholm. And then there was a thought that he may have been included in some sort of a deal there. Obviously it didn't work out, but I do believe that they've circled back. I think that they've had a discussion with the Calgary Flames to see what would happen there. And, you know, obviously the Canucks are definitely not on his no team, no trade list.
Is Calgary going to get a first-round pick for him, Irf, or do you think it's a second and a prospect or something like that?
I think right now, if someone offered him a first-round pick, they'd go ahead and take it. But, I mean, the Flames have been cooking a little bit or a little bit of recent late too. So I think when you look at organizationally, they say, okay, can we get in the mix here? Can we be a team that maybe goes and sees if we can get into one of the wild card positions? If I'm the Flames, I'm trying to obtain as many assets as I possibly can. What do? You really want to go into the playoffs and maybe get a chance in the first round? Or do you want to try and build your team for the future? And I think that's a goal in mind that they should definitely have.
On that depth defenseman, Irf, if they go about adding one of them, and I think there's a fair to good chance that they are, what do you think's most important for them with that piece? Is it handedness? Is it cup experience? Is it size? Like, what kind of profile do you think they're looking at for that depth defenseman?
I think it doesn't necessarily need to be cup experience. I think they would like someone with playoff experience, someone that's actually been in the trenches. You don't need to have made a cup final to know what playoff hockey's like. Obviously, the only playoff hockey that some of these guys know is the bubble. And then that was obviously unique in itself. But when you look at what their need is, I think it's a guy that you can depend on that can come in every couple of nights if you really need to. If you need a guy that's a 7-8 guy, it's a guy that's going to be out there working late after practice, a guy that's probably pretty good in the room, guy that has some good character, and definitely a guy that you aren't hesitant to put in. I think that when you look at depth defensemen and things like that, kind of get lost in, okay, he's really not going to play. Well, no. If you're the Vancouver Canucks and you've been pretty good with, guys not getting hurt this season, you want a guy that'd be able to play at any point in the lineup.
Something else we've been kicking around for the last week, because we've already mentioned the Edmonton Oilers here, Vegas Golden Knights, and you gotta think that Vegas is going to try and do something here, right, in defense of the title. They've taken some big swings there in the past. Can you see an arms race here in the Pacific? Can you see teams going out and adding up because their opponents, direct competitors in the Pacific, have it loaded up?
Oh, 100%. I mean, when the Canucks went out and got Zadorov, and everyone's like, okay, well, they added some size on the blue line. And then they go out and get Elias Lindholm. And then you say, okay, well, they're definitely thinking that they're contenders here. Like, they definitely are going all in. So the Edmonton Oilers get worried. We know the talk in Edmonton if Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl don't make a cup final, or like for them, it's cup final or bust for that team, that organization. Only a few more years left for both of those players. The Vegas Golden Knights, Matt, when you mentioned, like, that team always is in the mix. Obviously, they're winning the Stanley Cup and being a team that, they kind of got to do the Vegas thing. They always got to be in the mix. They got to sell it to their fans. So that's a team that interests me as well. But you look a little bit further down the list of teams in the Western Conference. The Dallas Stars are an interesting one as to a team that could definitely add and are kind of going about their business a little bit more quietly. But they're a team that, obviously if the Canucks make it a little bit further down the road in the playoffs, that they're a team that could be in the Western Conference.
Do you think they
Final.
make any defensive trades? We've talked about the Canucks acquiring somebody to take them away from other people, and is that a possibility?
I think so. I think right now, when you look at this Western Conference and you look at the league and how many good teams there are in this Western Conference, like, teams are going to have to load up. And I really do believe when the Canucks went out and acquired Elias Lindholm, other teams around them panicked a little bit. Vegas is like, oh, wow, okay, they're going right in. Edmonton and others like, we have to do something right now. We really do. We got absolutely smoked by them. And then a couple of times this season, and we can't have this again. And then you look at, a team like the Winnipeg Jets quietly going about their business and seeing the guys that they've been dealing with and obviously acquiring. And then, I mentioned Dallas Stars as well. But I think that you're going to see a lot of activity. I think the teams at the top are going to want to improve. Now, whether they're able to give away way too much for someone, I think that one remains to be seen. But I don't think we've definitely seen the last of teams kind of try to improve their hockey clubs.
Okay, one last playoff question for me.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
We haven't had to ask this question in a number of years. Are they snarly enough?
Oh, boy.
Are they sandpapery enough?
Mm-hmm.
Are they mean enough to play in the National Hockey
And
League
are
playoffs?
they going to get retribution on Jake Wallman for his gritty? No.
No, see that it's hilarious you mentioned that, because that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, people in this, in this market and fans online are like, well, they had to go after him. I mean, defenseman scored a overtime penalty shot to win the game. I'd be excited too.
You're allowed to celebrate, yeah.
At that point, if you're really mad about it, don't do the penalty, don't do that, and win the hockey game. I think that's one of the things. But to be completely honest, I don't think they are. I think the book on the Vancouver Canucks, if you look at the teams that have beat them, is lean on them, is play physical against them. You look at the Boston Bruins, right? You look at that game, you look at teams that have played them. The Vegas Golden Knights beat them 4-1.
These next few Vegas games are going to be interesting, right? They got a lot of games left versus Vegas. So
you got Vegas, you got Winnipeg, you got LA a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they've got some big games against some big teams. So I think the book on the Canucks right now is lean on them. Play on them physical, and obviously don't take penalties because you're going to get cooked. So right now, I don't believe they're tough enough, but I mean, you can add some sandpaper and things like that. But it's definitely something that I believe is in the mind of them.
The blue line's pretty heavy. The forward line's not so much.
Yeah.
No.
Quite. And Irf mentioned it earlier. How comfortable are you with Nils Oman in a playoff series? We've been talking about it for some time here, like Linus Karlsson, Phil DiGiuseppe. Like, are you really trusting these guys in a playoff series? So it's going to be fascinating over the next few weeks. Last question for me, Irf, but are you at all worried about their form? Haven't looked very good, top six in particular, here for the last little while. This guy tried to tell me that they're damn near at a slump here.
2-1-1.
2-1-1 is the slump now, Irf. What do you think?
Well, it's crazy. I mean, you look at some of this, like, this team has been so good this season and banked so many wins in their back pockets. We're just looking at something to pick at, right? So you look at the game against the Boston Bruins. They were terrible in that hockey game. The Bruins just flat out slapped them, right? And then you go into this weekend, you see the game against the Detroit Red Wings, and obviously, the overtime winner, and they're already in that game. The concerning part was that third period. Yeah, they're going to want to have it back and whatever. Then you go against the Washington Capitals. Okay, you get the win there, but it was pretty much gifted to you. I mean, like, in overtime there, you're going to take in your chances a little bit. But I just think this team is now going to start to have to figure it out a little bit. I think they're in the end of the road trip here against, obviously, the Chicago Blackhawks. And then you come home and you barely leave your time zone. So they get a lot of home cooking. They get a lot of being able to have that advantage of being on home ice. I think there's a period in March were like 9 straight at home. So we're definitely going to see this team get some wins, bank some more wins in their back pocket. But again, until that there's an X beside their name and they've clinched a playoff spot, like, I think a lot of guys in that room believe that they really haven't accomplished anything yet.
Yeah. And rightfully so. Stay hungry here on road to the playoffs. Awesome stuff, Irf. Thanks for the time, buddy. We'll catch up soon.
Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.